Being an educator that teaches beyond boundaries demands a wide array of background, experiences, dispositions, and skills. Teaching well requires looking beyond the parameters of the classroom, both to the wider academic community as well as to the needs and assets of individual students. Teaching well requires both teachers and students to strive to push beyond their current content knowledge and skill levels, and teaching well requires thoughtful consideration and analysis throughout the planning, execution, and reflection stages of lesson planning. Before I begin to discuss and provide examples of the dispositions and skills I have gained through the Master's in Teaching program at the University of Maryland University College in more detail, I would like to reflect on my previous education experiences which influenced my conception as an exemplary educator. In terms of my own education, I have a BA and MA in history, both of which have allowed me to do extensive primary source research and to gain an in-depth knowledge of historical content and analysis. Whether it's looking at the Columbian Exchange beginning in 1492 or understanding the contemporary populism movement, all students today need to understand historical context and use primary sources to thrive. Since 2007 and 2008, when I taught 4 sections of military history as a teaching assistant at the University of Maryland, I have been dedicated to teaching history through primary source research. I am now finishing my Master's in Teaching so that I can complement my background in history with a rigorous grounding in those dispositions and skills needed to be an educator who reaches each and every student. Individual students have individual needs and assets that teachers need to be aware of and to address. My full-time work over the last 6 years has been devoted to individual attention and instruction as a tutor for C2 Education Center in Germantown, Maryland. My job responsibilities have included tutoring hundreds of students of highly diverse backgrounds in reading, writing, college essays, English as a foreign language, social studies, and advanced placement and international baccalaureate courses. I've also trained 10 new tutors during my time there, helping them to focus on recognizing how to motivate, understand, and challenge individual students most effectively. The needs of my tutoring students inspired me to obtain certificates in teaching students with dyslexia and teaching English as a foreign language, both of which uniquely qualify me to work with a diverse array of students of different language, cultural, and learning backgrounds. At present, in addition to my tutoring work, I'm a student teacher at Seneca Valley High School in Germantown, Maryland. Under mentor teacher Dr. Ed Deitch, I teach 5 sections including 2 sections of inclusion and 3 sections of honors of 9th grade United States history. Here I enact the dispositions and skills that I have honed throughout the Master's in Teaching program through exercises such as creating school reform plans, individual IEPs, and cross-disciplinary lesson plans. The various dispositions and skills of an effective educator for the 21st century have been summed up in different documents by different organizations, but one of the most prominent of these is the In-Task Model Core Teaching Standards. These standards were created in 2011 by the Council of Chief State School Officers, who hoped that these standards would quote, outline what teachers should know and be able to do to ensure every K-12 student reaches the goal of being ready to enter college or the workforce in today's world. These standards outline the common principles and foundations of teaching practice that cut across all subject areas and grade levels and that are necessary to improve student achievement, end quote. There are 10 in-task standards, and I would like to reflect over the next 10 minutes on how I view each standard in terms of the projects that I have completed throughout my Master's in Teaching. Throughout this presentation, I will employ 4 images or metaphors, one for each of the 4 categories of the 10 in-task standards, that I hope will make these 4 categories more clear. Numbers 1 through 3 concern the learner and learning, which I think of like my whole school building and its surrounding community. Numbers 4 through 5 concern content knowledge, which I think of like my desk. Numbers 6 through 8 concern instructional practice, which I think of like my classroom. And numbers 9 through 10 concern professional responsibility, which I think of like my social studies department office. As I continue to grow as an educator, I will look to these 4 categories to help me categorize the areas of my profession about which I will reflect and seek to grow. For each of the 10 in-task standards, I will now provide a brief discussion of an example of how I meet each standard and how this makes me an educator who teaches beyond boundaries. When I think of Category 1, the learner and learning, I think of my whole school building and its community because learner development, learner differences, and learner environments concern not only myself as an educator, but the entire community of other students, educators, administrators, community members, and parents who can help individual students become independent individuals who take responsibility for their futures. We have to consider schools as a whole when addressing classroom issues. In-task standard number 1 demands that teachers understand the quote, cognitive, linguistic, social, emotional, and physical development, end quote, that make up diverse American students. As I work with my group to prepare the instructional initiative section of a school improvement plan, I first identified the likely causes of the students' inability to pass their English and government high school assessments. These included high rates of student mobility and a lack of attention to English language learners, students with behavioral or learning challenges, and students transitioning into high school. In creating the extensive and varied suggestions for addressing these needs, I realized that to succeed, students needed, quote, developmentally appropriate instruction that takes into account individual learners' strengths, interests, and needs, and that enables each learner to advance and accelerate his or her learning, end quote. In order to help students who have moved from other districts, I drew on my experience as a tutor and recommended employing an extended learning opportunities tutoring program, or mediation tutoring program for eligible students that provides direct small group instruction in compliance with No Child Left Behind. In order to help ELL students, I recommend need-based intervention for students during the school day in the form of the Read 180 program, which uses explicit academic language instruction, opportunities for structured academic discussion, scaffolded writing techniques, and added teacher support. In addition to thinking of a classroom within the whole school, good teaching also considers an individual within their broader academic setting. Working with students who have IEPs exemplifies the critical dispositions, essential knowledge, and performances required to show proficiency in the area of learning differences. First and foremost, my plan for teaching Stephanie, a fictitious student with an IEP, proves my core belief that, quote, all learners can achieve at high levels, end quote, and that I will persist in, quote, helping each learner reach his or her full potential, end quote. With this anchor for my teaching, combined with my respect for, quote, learners as individuals with different personal and family backgrounds and various skills, abilities, perspective, talents, and interests, end quote, I'm equipped to focus on my student learning strengths rather than challenges as a way to help reach their educational goals. For example, with Stephanie, I'll focus on scaffolding her work so that she can improve in those areas in which she is weaker, such as reading longer passages by herself and taking notes. The focus of the Learning Environment Standard is on the teacher using multiple methods to help students have a learning experience that challenges them to learn while also playing to their strengths. One of the key ways in which students may have this experience is through interdisciplinary group work. The groups that I created for my government lesson plan on government types, reading strategies, and interpreting graphs are groups in which students have already been working, and they are based on student surveys. These student surveys would inquire about student likes and dislikes, learning styles, and strengths and weaknesses. I, as a teacher, would then assemble the groups based on these categories to create heterogeneous learning pods for the students. For the mock class created for the lesson, there were some gifted students, some English learners, some learners with mental and physical challenges. Overall, I would provide instruction throughout the course about how students can best work in groups, how they can work collaboratively, respect each other, and share responsibility. When I think of Category 2, content knowledge, I think of my desk because content knowledge and application of content are especially my job as an educator. I have a unique background in history and social studies which has prepared me to teach the content and skills of those fields so that students can apply their learning in the future. In addition to making crucial decisions about how to cover the historical content demanded by the curriculum, it is essential for history teachers to impart to their students the skills and dispositions demanded in that field. In particular, this means teaching students to be analytical readers of both primary and secondary documents. History is not about memorizing some sort of canon of facts. History is a complex field that involves understanding different perspectives through awareness of bias. The lesson I created concerning the Rosetta Stone for our world history class combines important topics in world history, namely European interactions with the Middle East and in modern world, that led to one of the most important archaeological discoveries ever, with instruction in the reading strategy of understanding words in context. Students have a chance to practice the skill in groups as well as individually through the use of focused close exercises, in which I extracted key content vocabulary from secondary readings. My Populism WebQuest project for the AP United States History project demonstrates my application of content because I integrate technology, help learners to develop high-level questioning skills, and help learners produce original work. Students learn how to do document-based questions by using selected online primary sources concerning populism to create their own model DBQ. In order for students to be successful in this portion of the test, they must combine content knowledge, familiarity with primary source documents, and analytical skills related to forming arguments based on primary documents. This project affords students the chance to practice these skills on their own and to produce an original product demonstrating their proficiency. The leeway the students are provided in selecting their own sources allows the students to consider varying sides and consider how their test is actually created. Finally, the interaction with technology involved with the research and production also allows students to be engaged with tools needed for today's world. When I think of Category 3, instructional practice, I think of my classroom, because assessment, planning for instruction, and instructional strategies involve the overarching ways that I approach teaching. Every aspect of preparation, instruction, and assessment, even seemingly smaller details, such as how desks are arranged or how I conceptualize lessons within a unit, matter a great deal for the success of each and every student in my classroom, both now and in their futures. In response to students' challenges, and because I recognize the importance of aligning instruction and assessment with learning goals, I came up with an action research tutoring curriculum that teaches students various methods by which they can study for AP tests. Assessment is a crucial part of this curriculum. For example, I began with a diagnostic test in order for students to be able to evaluate their current knowledge and to recognize those areas in which they needed further improvement. I believe in the necessity of using test data to influence differentiated learning experiences for students, so reviewing their diagnostic tests allowed me to craft my instruction accordingly. In addition, reviewing their exams enabled me to focus more on strategies for essay writing with those students who are weaker in that area, and more on multiple choice questions for the students who are weaker in that area. Through the course of the rest of the curriculum, I included ongoing interim tests for each of the new content areas because this satisfies the need to match assessment with learning objectives. Because I understand the need to provide timely and effective feedback, I also included a review of all the interim tests and the diagnostic tests before the students retook the diagnostic test on the last day of the class and saw their improvement. My lesson plan on the Columbian Exchange especially exemplifies my ability to tailor curriculum and content to the unique makeup of my students in my classroom. Because I am committed to the disposition of respecting, quote, learners' diverse strengths and needs, end quote, and, quote, using this information to plan effective instruction, end quote, I was able to craft a lesson plan that will be engaging to all of my students and will also allow them to achieve the content knowledge demanded by the curriculum. In order to allow this content to come alive for students, I created a lesson plan with various types of instruction, including formative assessments such as a pre-quiz and exit journal, for which I also created a scaffolded version for students with learning challenges, audio and visual media, and heterogeneous and collaborative group work. Finally, in my quest to incorporate, quote, prior learning knowledge and learner interest, end quote, the pre-quiz, exit journal, and homework assignments ask the students about their previous knowledge of the Columbian Exchange goods in relationship with foods of each student's cultural heritage. One of the key goals of my action research tutoring curriculum is to use effective instructional strategies that integrate various learning strategies with historical content. Not only is this an effective means to keep students engaged and to play to the strengths of various types of learners, but also this technique will help foster students who are self-directed learners who gain learning skills that they can employ for future learning. For example, for the first session of tutoring, for which the content is the Columbian Exchange, the concurrent learning strategy is use of maps. Because the Columbian Exchange involves the interaction and exchange between old and new worlds, knowledge of geography is an essential skill to begin to understand the Columbian Exchange. But beyond this connection, I hope through the lesson to provide students with a basic geographic knowledge and an interest in maps that they can use to enhance their study of any other subject matter in history or in other classes. When I think of Category 4, professional responsibility, I think of my social studies department office because professional learning and ethical practice as well as leadership and collaboration have a large part to play in how I can improve as an educator and continue to find ways to reach my students and provide them with the knowledge, dispositions, and skills that they need to succeed in their futures. I worked with a team of fellow MIT students to do analysis of a fictitious set of classroom data. Through this experience, I was able to, quote, independently and in collaboration with colleagues, use a variety of data to evaluate the outcomes of teaching and learning and to adopt planning and practice. End quote. One of the key reasons that I believe in this model is that it allows me to have a more objective review of my own teaching. This helps me to avoid my own biases and go beyond my own in-class observations through the use of technology. Once we had done the breakdown of the data, I then had the chance to more clearly and effectively analyze what went well in instruction and what did not. From there, I created a differentiated action plan with some recommendations that would help the whole class, some that helped certain groups of students, and some for specific students. Throughout my leadership on our core group adolescent video project, I took, quote, initiative to grow and develop with colleagues through interactions that enhance practice and support student learning, end quote. My group members commented about my leadership, quote, he worked really hard on organizing us all and keeping everyone on task. Evan definitely deserves the highest grade. Evan put in all the time and effort to make sure we completed our project. Evan helped me out with my tech issues, even after the date. Evan kept us on pace and really put a great effort toward every aspect of the assignment, end quote. Overall, my goal was to be a leader who listened first, and our collaborative model meant that some of my decisions were kept while others were changed. In conclusion, in addition to my background as an educator, which I have already discussed, the MIT program provided me with a diverse set of educational experiences that addressed the in-test standards in a variety of ways. Furthermore, the UMUC MIT program has its own set of key dispositions, discussed in the MIT conceptual framework, which urge that an educator strive to improve in 6 key areas, all of which overlap with the various aspects of the in-test standards. These areas are as follows: teaching and learning, analysis, reflection, and continuous improvement, technology integration, creativity, innovativeness, and adaptability, local, national, and global community, and leadership. Each of these 6 stems from 3 basic propositions. Quote, I know my students can learn at high levels, and I know my work can promote high levels of learning for all students, end quote. Through course readings, individual and collaborative projects, conferences, and observations, as well as the capstone of my student teaching internship, I believe that I successfully embodied these 3 concepts and my teaching bears this out. Whether it be my school and its community, my desk, my classroom, or my social studies department office, I will be a teacher who integrates the fundamental skills and dispositions to teach beyond boundaries.